Good evening. Welcome to the 49th New York Film Festival, and welcome to the Eleanor Bunin Monroe Film Center. My name is Eugene Hernandez from the Film Society of Lincoln Center. I want to thank you for being here today for another one of our New York Film Festival forums. Forums is a new section of the festival this year. It's a section that comprises a number of Q&As, talks, panel discussions, dialogues with filmmakers, book signings, as you might have seen earlier today. And then at 7 o'clock tonight, we have Bill Plimpton coming and showing some work, so we invite you to stick around for that. Anyway, without further ado, I want to thank you for coming. Hope you'll stick around tonight and enjoy not only this talk, but the one after. And to introduce our conversation today, actually, before I do that, I'm going to put in a plug. There's people who are watching right now on live stream, so this event is being streamed live. And thank you to the folks who are watching. We'll try to take your questions if you have any. Special thank you to IndieWIRE for helping us organize this event. And now let me introduce Basil Tsiokos.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here. I want to just kind of jump right into it. This is the director of Vito, Jeffrey Schwarz. We're very happy to have him here, and I'm happy to sort of facilitate this little discussion, and we'll open it up to questions from you as well whenever we kind of get to that point. Okay. I've known Jeffrey a few years. I've been fortunate in other capacities to program some of his other films. Let's actually start there. You have a pretty if somebody went to IMDb, you have like 9 million entries on IMDb because of the commercial work you do.
Right.
But in terms of the sort of your more personal projects, you've done a number of featured documentaries that are biographies. You seem to be drawn to larger than life figures, sometimes in literal ways as well as figurative ways. For those of you that don't know Jeffrey's work, he's done a film called Spine Tingler, which is about the legendary showman William Castle, who you may know of from what is it?
House on Haunted Hill, The Tingler, Homicidal.
The Tingler, like, you know,
Macabre.
He was doing gimmicky kinds of films in the 50s and the 60s where you'd go into the theater and there'd be like a buzzer underneath your seat and you'd like, you've also done a film on Jack Wrangler, who became one of the top names in first gay and then straight porn. And we'll talk a little bit later about this, but your next film is about Divine, John Waters' muse, who, if nobody else is larger than life, she is. So, you know, one of the things that I want to talk to you about then is what draws you to a particular subject?
It seems like these were all the people that I became obsessed with in college, and like one by one, I'm just sort of going down the list. But I mean, with William Castle, it was just sort of John Waters kind of turned me on to William Castle. I had read an article that he wrote called "Whatever Happened to Showmanship," and it was like a love letter to William Castle. And so I started getting interested in William Castle and all of the theatrical stunts that he did in the 50s and the 60s. Jack Wrangler. I think these are people that are that I just fall in love with, and that are somehow marginalized or not taken seriously. And I feel like there's just more to it than meets the eye. And I want to sort of share my obsessions with the world and just sort of look underneath the exterior and see what's underneath. I mean, a lot of these guys sort of created these personas for themselves. Definitely Bill Castle,
right.
Who was a really kind of an insecure guy, and he kind of created this larger-than-life persona of the cigar-chomping movie producer. Jack Wrangler was a scrawny little sissy kid who grew up in Hollywood, and he created an image of a macho man for his porn career, you know,
right.
Flannel and cigarettes and all that stuff. And Divine also. What more needs to be said? So yeah, I think there's certain things in common. I think Vito is a little bit different, but he was also a showman, and he was
Absolutely.
Also a larger-than-life figure. So.
And actually, let's. I meant to do this, but those of you that are sitting here, who has seen Vito? It screened yesterday.
It screened yesterday. We
Right.
had our world premiere. Our editor Philip Harrison is here. We screened yesterday. Twice,
right.
And both screenings were very well attended, and we were very, very pleased.
Excellent.
A lot of Vito's family and friends, fellow activists, you know, all these. Larry Kramer was there. All
Great.
these iconic people who were in the film actually came to celebrate with us.
And so, has anyone seen the film here yet? I know Jim has. And okay, so that's good. That's good to know. We know where to sort of have the bar in terms of what we're going to talk about here. Who's familiar with the book The Celluloid Closet or the documentary called The Celluloid Closet? Great. So we got a couple people. All right. So we're gonna talk about this stuff. You know, one of the things that draws me to Vito Russo. So the film Vito is about Vito Russo. One of the things that really draws me to it is that you're telling a story of basically the lost generation of gay men from AIDS. These are pivotal figures that were super important. Got a lot of work done in the time before AIDS, and basically an entire generation basically passed. You're helping to sort of unearth those stories, and I think that's really important to be able to do. I guess talk a little bit about sort of, I mean, do you feel that kind of, not necessarily pressure, but that sort of impetus to be able to tell that story and to tell it in a certain way so that other people kind of learn about how important that character is?
Yeah, I mean, that's something we definitely thought about when we were making the film. I mean, we definitely felt the weight of that missing generation. And it's sort of, you know, who are our elders? Who are we going to look to pass on this history and to pass on these lessons that were learned and these hard-fought battles that were fought in the past? With Vito, I kind of realized at a certain point that Vito was right in the center of everything. He was sort of like, I don't want to say a Zelig figure because he was, you know, he actually made history. He didn't just, he wasn't just a bystander.
Right.
He actually made history. I mean, he was of that generation that came of age before Stonewall, when homosexuality was literally illegal. You know, every institution was making life extremely difficult for gay people. It was impossible to have an out life.
Right.
Know? So he came of age during that time, and then he was there for the, he was literally at Stonewall. He was there for the aftermath of Stonewall. He was there for the birth of gay liberation with his work with the Gay Activist Alliance. He became very interested in media representation of gay people and started studying how we were represented on film. Started doing these film screenings at the Firehouse of the Gay Activist Alliance. Started creating community through his film screenings. Wrote the Celluloid Closet. So every step of the way, he was right there. He was there for the creation of GLAAD. He was one of the founding members of ACT UP.
Right.
So it was a way to tell the story of the gay and lesbian civil rights movement from pre-Stonewall to ACT UP through this guy's life.
Right.
You know?
And for me, you know, I know a fair amount of stuff about gay life, gay film especially. I used to run the Gay and Lesbian Film Festival here in New York, and I was actually surprised. I didn't know he was part of ACT UP or GLAAD, to be honest. And that's, you know, I should have known better, and that says something. So I think it's really important, and I was glad that the film didn't really. The film basically does a sort of spends equal amount of time, I feel, with the sort of post-Stonewall gay rights activism, Celluloid Closet kind of film representational stuff, and then AIDS activism towards the latter part of his life.
It did seem like there were basically three acts,
right.
And you know that doesn't always happen with a life. It doesn't always sort of work out so neatly. But this was the structure that Philip and I came up with. The first act was excuse me was his sort of upcoming into the gay world, and Act One sort of ends at the dissolving of the Gay Activist Alliance. Yes. The Act Two focuses on his film criticism and the Celluloid Closet, and Act Three is the AIDS crisis and ACT UP.
You know, so that sort of activism aspect of his life seemed pretty much it carried through his life. And at a time, I believe the film was actually going to be called Activist. Is that correct?
Early on, we were calling it Activist. The Times of Vito Russo, and it's a mouthful. And I'm glad we changed the title. So it's now just called Vito.
Well, you know, I don't want to put you on the spot on this kind of thinking, so we won't do too much of this. But if Vito were alive today, what do you where do you think his activism would be channeled towards? Do you think he'd be part of sort of the Occupy Wall Street sort of stuff? Where do you see? I mean, obviously gay rights were his thing, and gay media representation, et cetera. But obviously he saw the potential of change through direct action. And
to be honest, I think he would be marginalized now. You know, I was thinking about this a lot because he was not somebody who believed in institutions. Like, I don't want to speak negatively of GLAAD or HRC or these institutions that are they're more corporate, they're more top heavy. You know, he was a street activist, and I think that he would be very critical. He did not hesitate to criticize even the gay community. Right. I think that he today, I don't want to speak for him, but I really feel like he'd be screaming and yelling at the gay community for either being complacent or for resting on our laurels or for fighting battles like marriage, which I'm sure he would have thought would be important, but I think he would probably be just as angry about inequities in income. You know, I think he would definitely be down on Wall Street. I think his focus was about people. He cared about people. He cared about injustice. He cared about the underdog. Right. And so I think his interests were definitely way beyond just gay and lesbian civil rights. But you know, early on in the gay liberation movement, different communities needed to band together. Yes. And so the African American civil rights movement, the student protest movement, the anti-war movement, the women's movement, the gay community took their lessons from those battles. Yes. And I don't know, there was a lot more unity, I feel. And now it seems like we just have to focus on getting that marriage thing passed, and then we'll be all done. Right. We can move on. And certainly, I know he wouldn't think that.
And sort of one more sort of the what if kind of question. Again, I don't want you to feel like you have to speak for him, but just sort of given you've done a lot of research on him and everything, obviously, given that the landscape for LGBT images now is radically different in terms of the availability, different options, internet, YouTube, whatever, as well as like TV representations, movie, et cetera. What do you think he would have? I mean, what do you think Vito would have? How would he have responded? What would he have thought was a really great thing? What would he have thought would be a really terrible thing that transpired?
I mean, I feel like he would have still been championing independent cinema. I think he would have loved Weekend. That's a film that came out recently that I love it so
Absolutely,
much.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people have seen that. It reminded me a lot of Parting Glances, which was a film that from the late 80s that Vito really loved.
Yeah.
So I think that he would, even when he was around, he was berating the gay community by going to see Batman instead of going to see Parting Glances. So I think he would still be championing the independent cinema, and it's actually a lot more difficult now to make an independent gay film. I mean, the economics of it are just so difficult. So now we have gay and lesbian images in the mainstream. We have it on Glee, we have it on Desperate Housewives, we have it on Modern Family, we have movies. But I think that he wouldn't look to Hollywood. He wouldn't look to Hollywood for films about our lives. He'd want gay people to make our own films.
And with his own, I mean, he had his own television show, which is something that the film also goes into. And not to ask you to speak negatively about anything, but how would he have responded to like a Logo or a Here or that kind of thing, where it's like a dedicated exclusive channel for those kinds of images? I
mean, I think there were a lot of high hopes for those channels, and I enjoy the programming on both of those channels, and I don't want to speak negatively about them, but there's no news on those channels. I think what Vito was doing with his TV show this is before before the internet, before there was before there was any kind of public interest shows about gay life, and he invented this show called Our Time. It was on Manhattan Public Access Cable here in the 80s. It lasted 13 episodes, and he was really filling a void that really needed to be done. And he was we actually found the masters of those tapes.
You did. I was about to ask. Yeah,
they're really incredible. I mean, he did an hour where he talked about he interviewed Harry Hay and Barbara Giddings, who were early gay rights activists in the 50s and the 60s. And he interviewed Harvey Fierstein, backstage at Torture and Trilogy. He did an entire episode on AIDS, and when you can really see in his eyes the mounting panic. It's really it's a fascinating time capsule.
And are those archived anywhere?
We're working on it. We're going to make sure we find a good home for them, because I didn't know that they existed, and we tracked down the producer, one of the original producers of the show.
That's great.
And he's a very genial host of that show, and it really shows how respected and well known he was in New York at the time. I mean, I think if you ask anybody over a certain age who lived through the 70s and 80s, they all know who Vito was.
Yes.
I mean, actually, in our research, we found somebody was running for, there was a congressman running, I don't remember who it was, and there was a direct mail campaign for this congressman, and it was a letter from Vito Russo.
Oh, that's great.
And on the envelope, it said Vito Russo. So, and this was being sent to, every Democrat in New York, and particularly
carried
a lot of
weight.
gay people, and it carried a lot of weight. This was in like 84 or 85, something like that.
That's
so
great.
Just a little detail that I noticed that I found really interesting.
Yeah, definitely. So to sort of get away from the speculation and talk a little bit more specifically about the film itself, so backing up 1 second, you worked on Celluloid Closet, the film.
Right.
And that sort of kind of not began your film career, but was a fairly fairly big part of the origins of your career.
Yeah, I mean, right after film school, I came out in about 91, and Vito had just passed away. And I knew who he was. I was aware of him, but I didn't read the Celluloid Closet until it came out, and that kind of fused these two, passions of mine, and film and my identity. And read the book, tried to see all the films.
So really quickly, the Celluloid Closet, for those that don't know in the audience, you describe it as, in a succinct way.
It was like the Bible of gays on film, basically. He wrote this book. It took him about 10 years to research and write the book. It was the first book that fully cataloged and dissected how gay and lesbian people were represented on film from the silent era through it came out in 81, and then he did a revised edition in 87. And it was really, he was able to tie in his political activism with media representation, which he felt was like the most important thing. How we're perceived.
Before that, there was nothing.
There was
really
nothing
written about.
He really was. I mean, there was a couple books that kind of touched on it, but the level of research that he did, there was no. You see it in the film. I mean, there was no subject in the card catalog that said homosexuality. that film as to represent the activist voice. And yes, and then I ended up being able to help work on the Celluloid Closet at first as an intern, unpaid intern, and then when they had sort of got the film up on its feet, and then through getting donations from within the gay community, there was, again, direct mail.
Right.
There was a letter from Lily Tomlin. They just went out and they got donations. And I remember, opening envelopes and checks were coming in. Oh, there's a check from Neil Diamond. There's a check from Hugh Hefner. And then HBO, also Sheila Evans at HBO, who was running HBO documentary films even back then.
Right.
They went to New York with a pitch reel. And she didn't even watch the pitch reel. She said, we have to make the movie. Vito had already passed away by then. And so that was my first job. And that was when I really first got to know Vito, the activist, because I knew his work as a film scholar. But they had all of his original research materials, audio cassettes of him interviewing people for the Celluloid Closet. It was, I listened to an entire dinner that he had with Tennessee Williams.
Oh, right.
And you hear Tennessee say, "Pass the sugar substitute, Vito." And it was fantastic. And there were extensive interviews with Vito. So I learned all about his entire life, basically.
And so at a certain point, Rob and Jeffrey were thinking about including Vito's story in the film, but they didn't. So have you had it in the back of your head to be the person to tell Vito's story of this many years, or how did you come to it? I
don't think I knew that at first, but watching Rob and Jeffrey, and I love the film that they made, and they did struggle with this because Vito was his memory was still so fresh then, people still knew him, and you couldn't separate his name from the work. Now I think people don't necessarily, they watch the Celluloid Closet, and then a photo of this guy Vito comes on at the end, and they don't necessarily know who that is. So I think they had at one point, they did, I don't think they would mind me saying this, but they did a test shoot, and they had an actor playing a young Vito watching movies, and they tried to incorporate his voice, and it just wasn't really working creatively for them, and I think wisely they decided to go to start interviewing people, and it was a clips and interviews kind of thing, which that's what Vito wanted.
Right.
And a lot of people criticized it for not being angry enough or political enough, and Vito didn't want it to be that.
Yeah,
when he was alive, he said, "I want it to be that's entertainment." Right. And that's what it was. And it's deeper than that, but that's basically what they did. Right. And but I guess it must have been in my mind somewhere that something needed to be done at some point about Vito, and I don't know when I guess about 5 years ago, it just seemed like it was time. And
did you have, given already that the Celluloid Closet was out there, and so that focus on gays in film, and he had done the clip show for a long time, so it was sort of an adaptation in ways of that. Did you know that you were going to focus so much on activism versus this more publicly known kind of side of, well, now anyway, publicly known kind of side of him?
I was surprised that, the Celluloid Closet in his film scholarship, it's only really a third of the movie. It's like the middle section of the film. It's very distinct, But movies and film and visibility is kind of a running theme through the whole film. So. I learned so much that I didn't know about him, and I learned so much about gay history that I didn't know. The challenge was to how do you tell this story?
What was the most surprising thing you learned about Vito that you hadn't known?
I was surprised at how much criticism that he had at points toward the gay community, that he wasn't afraid to let the gay community have it. Like when Ronald Reagan was running for re-election, a lot of gay people at the time were going to vote for him.
Right, there's that clip in the film.
And there's a clip of the film of him like chastising the gay community, and I found that very powerful. Like he didn't, he didn't mince words, and he obviously had strong words for our enemies, but he also, if he felt people weren't doing enough, if he felt people weren't supporting gay film, even if he felt people weren't supporting ACT UP, he would let you know.
Right. I think you answered this already, but the archival footage that's in the film of Vito himself, interviews, that's all sort of from Rob and Jeffrey's what they inherited from him?
Yeah,
or?
Well, some of it is. They did extensive interview with him on video before they started filming Common Threads. Okay. So there was about an hour-and-a-half interview where it's really poignant, and it's very personal, and it's just him sitting in the Telling Pictures office on Dolores Street, across the street where Hitchcock filmed Vertigo. And it's just him telling his whole story from pre-Stonewall through, his lover Jeffrey, how he met Jeffrey, Jeffrey's illness, losing Jeffrey, ACT UP, it's all there, and he's just telling it, and he's dredging up a lot of painful memories, but it's also very funny, and the film would probably, we'd be able to make it without that interview, but this really provided the ability to have Vito narrate.
Exactly, and I think
story.
that's really great. I mean, you get a sense of him through that. I mean, you get it through his family and his friends, obviously, but having him speak and sort of lend that aspect to it is I think, great.
It's very important. I think it'd be a very different movie without that. Yeah.
That archive, is that preserved and cataloged? Did you do that? Did you catalog it while you were basically putting this together?
We have so much stuff now that, I mean, a lot of the materials that we did find are from archives. So we worked with the New York Public Library. We worked with with UCLA, which actually has a preservation program with Outfest in LA. So they preserve a lot of materials. Vito's family had a lot of material. You know, people just hold on to things. Thank God. They have a box in their basement, and they've got all these tapes. We found the tape of the 1973 Gay Pride Rally, which was extremely rare. It was like the entire thing. It was about an hour and a half. It's Vito emceeing this 73 rally, which is in the film, and Bette Midler appeared at that. But also there's all these other entertainers, and that was this dramatic moment where the drag queens left the movement, literally at that moment. So it was miraculous how much stuff we were able to find.
Is there any chance some of this could end up in some kind of collected form or together with the Vito release on DVD or something? I
hope so. I mean, if there are DVDs a year from now, we'll hopefully be able to include
Well,
that.
we should mention that the film, speaking of Sheila Nevins, who we all love, the film is going to be broadcast on HBO.
That's right.
Later in June.
In June, they're going to be programming it for Pride, and so we have a long road ahead of us for festivals. So,
but it'll get out there.
It'll be out there, which is amazing, and the fact that it's going to be on HBO will mean a lot of people who, you know, either can't or aren't able to attend a gay film festival or any film festival will be able to watch it at home. People can see it accidentally. I love the idea that some 14-year-old kid is going to be flipping channels and will see Vito's story and hopefully become really engaged with him.
Absolutely. One more question about sort of the archive. I'm just curious, and I don't remember hearing it in the film, but he was a writer, he was a critic, obviously. Did he ever have aspirations to make films himself?
Yeah, actually, he was asked about that, and I think that he didn't really want to direct films.
But screenplays or anything?
He wanted to write a science fiction movie. He loved science fiction.
Really? Okay.
Horror. So,
and is there anything like even treatments or anything that's in there?
No. I think that he was a film lover.
Right.
But happily I have so much of his writing, and we're compiling it all now for a book, a Vito Russo Reader. So I hope that we'll be able to roll that out.
One question about the politics. In the film, it's mentioned that Vito didn't immediately see Stonewall in a political light. Do you talk a little bit about why you think that is? I mean, was it a question of it just wasn't seen at the moment as something that was going to lead anywhere, or there was a certain level of passivity, or what was that he immediately didn't sort of? He's such an engaging and sort of dynamic person later, and so involved with so many different aspects of gay liberation after that point. Why wasn't he sort of like in the middle there with the drag queens?
Well, I mean, he already had a consciousness about it. He already had an awareness that the situation was dire and that it needed to change. You know, I think Stonewall has become very mythic.
Yes.
There's actually someone here who was at Stonewall. Where is he? Anyway, Jim. But it's because it was very mythic, and I don't think people at the moment knew what it was. But in the very immediate aftermath of Stonewall, it was seized upon as a moment.
Right.
So when he was there, I think maybe he just tactically, I don't know that he thought that was really the best way to go. But he was not. I don't think he considered himself an activist until he joined the Gay Activist Alliance and really joined a movement, a burgeoning movement.
Gotcha. One other question really briefly, and we don't have to spend too much time on this, but there was also a mention, I think, in the TV show that they engaged in gossip and all that kind of stuff. And outing, were they engaged in outing in any way?
It was a little bit before. I mean, that was sort of starting to be talked about in the late 80s with Michelangelo and
So was he? Do you know if he had any opinion about it, or?
Yeah, well, I mean, Lily Tomlin was a very close friend of his, and Lily was not really very out in the 70s, but they were close, and it's in the film, but she was offered the cover of Time if she would come out, and she was a major star, and that would have been a really radical thing to do. I can understand why she would be uncomfortable with that, but so she turned that down, and she did an interview with Vito in The Advocate, and Vito knew she was a lesbian, and he knew that he knew Jane Wagner, and now she's fully completely open about it. But at the time, the fact that she did an interview with The Advocate is, in my mind, outing herself. And if you can read between the lines, you kind of know.
But in terms of his sort of his obvious awareness of the impact of images and the representational question around gay and lesbian images. Did he feel strongly that, not necessarily her, she's a friend, and yes, she did the advocate interview, but for just in general and other purposes, like, was he going to name names of others?
I don't think he would have.
He wouldn't have done that.
No,
Okay.
I mean, I think he respected people, that people needed to do this in their own time,
Right. Okay.
and I think that he would have had no problem with outing somebody who was actively harming
Sure,
the
sure.
community. But I don't think he'd want to out, a movie star necessarily.
Right.
But when Rock Hudson, when the news about Rock Hudson came out after he died of AIDS, everyone was pretending to be shocked when they found out he was gay, and he was like, everyone already knew this already. At least in the gay community, everyone already knew. So, but no, I don't think that he would be in favor of outing people.
And then one other question I have is, you do feature interviews with people that were friends of his during the time. Obviously, it's very difficult. A lot of men died. There are not that many around. Was it difficult to? I mean, how big was the circle of obviously he knew everybody, but his close circle of friends, how big was it? And if you know, just to give a sort of sense of the impact AIDS had on everybody, how many of his friends died? How who's left?
Well, we were lucky because a lot of them are still here.
Yes.
Arnie Kantrowitz,
absolutely.
who is Vito's
Still.
best friend.
Yeah.
Jim Owls is not alive. Jim Owls was in the Gay Activist Alliance with Vito in the 70s, and he died of AIDS after Vito. Jed Mattis, who was Vito's agent and beloved in the publishing world, he's not alive. So his mother Anne is not alive. Yesterday would have been her 89th birthday.
Wow.
So obviously there were a lot of people that we would love to have. I would love to have interviewed Michael
Well,
Callan. All these people that. But luckily there were Arthur Evans. We were so lucky to have Arthur Evans in the film, who was in the Gay Activist Alliance.
Right, yes.
And he recently passed away, just a few weeks ago. And so I'm just very grateful that we were able to reach out to him and have him in the film.
Well, you kind of stole my sort of last question, sort of. But who would, other than Vito, obviously himself, who would you wish you had the opportunity to interview for this film?
People who are
no longer with us.
Who are no longer with us. His mother Annie. She was. They loved each other. And she became an activist.
Right.
She wore her silence equals death button to the bank, in Lodi, New Jersey, and would get into fights with people online in the supermarket if they'd made a crack about gay people. And she was a very, very beloved and important person to Vito. But after he passed away, she really carried his torch. And she was not a very outgoing person. She was kind of a homebody.
Right.
But she was at the premiere of the Celluloid Closet here at the New York Film Festival. She did HRC dinners, and she was sort of like a Judy Shepherd of that time, because people were still very much aware of Vito and aware of her as this mother figure.
Yes.
So I wish I had gotten to talk
That's
to her.
great. And since you've kind of alluded to it, anybody alive that you would have liked to have included that you couldn't, or just didn't work out time-wise, schedule-wise?
There were.
You have a lot of great people in the film, obviously.
Yeah, no, there were some people just for there's no controversy. It's just scheduling reasons. We actually did reach out to Bette Midler, but she was doing her Vegas show, because but I think maybe she would have overpowered things. She's such a big personality.
Yeah.
But we have Armistead Maupin, Bruce Blanche, and Rob Epstein, and Jeffrey Friedman, and
Lily
Tomlin,
obviously is in it.
I'm very, very happy with the people.
Oh, absolutely.
That we have in the film.
I do want to go into questions in a second if people haven't in the audience, but I do want to talk a little, just briefly, about your upcoming projects. So I mentioned at the very beginning your doc on Divine, I Am Divine. What's the subtitle again?
It's just I Am Divine.
Okay.
And that's actually a line from Pink Flamingos.
Yes. And
it's the first full-length biography of Divine, who was John Waters' muse, also known as Harris Glenn Milstead, who was a sort of picked-on sissy kid growing up in suburban Baltimore, who joined up with John Waters when they were teenagers and created these incredible films that people still watch and quote, endlessly today. And he's another person that I felt like it was time,
Absolutely.
And this generation, unfortunately, unless you sort of pass this down and get people excited about movies that were made before they were born even, there'd be no Lady Gaga without Divine. Right. So,
And how did you come to, John Waters, obviously, and he's endorsed the film, he's supportive of it, and he's participating in it.
John was in Spine Tingler, my first film, and that was the first thing I did, is just call John and say, I'm thinking about doing this a film about Divine, and it was really beautiful moment where he said, I trust you.
Right.
I think you're the guy to do it. And yes, I give you my blessing. And he even endorsed it officially. We have a quote that we're using on our website. I mean, we've just launched a fundraising campaign, which is, very common in documentaries right now. We have an Indiegogo fundraising campaign, I Am Divine fundraising campaign. Our producer, Lottie, is here in the audience. So, we just do what we can to just push these things forward.
And where is the film now? I mean, is it you're about to go into post, you're in post-production?
We raised the financing to shoot it.
Okay.
And you can do these things in stages.
Yes.
So okay, now we're in the can.
Yes.
And now, okay, it's time we're going to launch our fundraising so we can go into edit.
Great.
And that will be our next stage. It's sort of rough cut stage, go to festivals.
So in a perfect world, if all the funding works out the way it's supposed to, when would that be out there, theoretically?
In a perfect world, it would be after Vito airs.
Okay.
It would be, fall of next year.
Perfect.
Or, Sundance 2013, who knows. But it all depends on, I feel like everything is going to be, whatever happens, it's meant to be.
Great.
So, but yeah, that'll be the next film.
And the website for people to take a look at?
IamDivineMovie.com. Thank you.
Perfect.
I should probably know that. IamDivineMovie.com.
And then...
Sorry, DivineMovie.com, and there's a Facebook page, I Am Divine. We have like 13,000 Divine fans from all over the world who, we post all kinds of insane things. They're all crazy, and they all are so excited about the film, and that's why we decided to do an Indiegogo campaign for the film, because the people are very rabid and passionate, so we have different levels, shit kicker, and chubby chaser, and all kind pervert.
That's great.
Yeah, it's fun. So we're trying to have fun with it.
Good. And then this last one, and if you don't want to answer this or you can't, after Divine, who's your next larger-than-life subject that you are hoping to cover?
Well, I'm working with Tab Hunter right now, who was a giant teen heartthrob in the 1950s, made movies with Sophia Loren and Natalie Wood, and was a huge recording star also, but secretly gay.
Right.
Every teenage girl's idol at the time. Ask anybody who grew up during that era, they would know Tab Hunter. And we're also working on a documentary about Anita Bryant and the Dade County Save Our Children campaign of 1977. That's the first time I've discussed this openly, so you heard it first.
Did Vito publicly talk about Anita at all? And that controversy?
He did. Yeah, he did. This was in '77 in Florida. There was a gay rights law that was repealed by.
There's the famous scene of the pie in her face.
Right, Anita. It's shown in the Milk movie.
Yes.
And he wasn't directly involved with that, but he did. There was actually in the film. There's a flyer for one of his Celluloid Closet lectures, and it's to benefit the Dade County Coalition. So he was definitely aware of it. She was a real villainess, but she also did more for the gay community by making the issue very, very visible. I would say she's definitely more important than Stonewall in pushing the gay rights movement very quickly forward. Absolutely. Even though we lost that battle and that law was repealed, we gained a lot in the long run.
Definitely. So I do want to turn it over to questions, if we have questions from the audience. If we do, there's a microphone that will come around, so don't be shy. There's a small group here, so feel free to ask questions. So just wait for the...
This isn't a question, this is just your other producer's plug, that Vito, for those of you who missed it last night, is playing in Washington Heights at the Coliseum Cinema this week. Right. So you do have one more chance to see it on the big screen here in New York before waiting till HBO next year. Thank you.
Great. And in Los Angeles, in West Hills.
Yeah, so sorry, where else is it?
This is in West Hills in Los Angeles.
Okay.
The HBO really believes in the movie, and they're releasing it in theaters so that we can qualify to be considered for Academy Award nomination.
Fantastic. Great.
Hi.
Yeah,
I had a question. I didn't want to interrupt the clapping, but the question is about the creative process where you're going to film, have it in the can, and then see what happens. How much of that kind of a process of let's do it and have the faith that it'll, you talked about when somebody trusted you, and which is a big part of, because we never know how it's going to wind up, but how much of that creative process and was a part of your career, and did you have to learn to just let it happen?
Yeah. Well, I have like a day job, and it's also producing content. So luckily, my day job is also very creative. I produce behind-the-scenes documentaries for the studios, for DVDs and TV specials and that kind of thing. But I really got into it by way of wanting to direct documentaries. And I think the main lesson I learned was not to wait for anybody to give me permission to start, and not to have sort of like the idea for Spine Tingler came about. And I actually, at first, it was about 10 years ago, I did approach networks and I approached studios, and I said, well, maybe they'll want to make this movie with me, and I can bring it to AMC or Turner Classic Movies, and I just wasn't getting anywhere. And I just, at a certain point, just decided I just have to make it and just trust that it will all come together at some point, and the fates will be kind to us. And I think that's the only way to do it. The same thing with the Jack Wrangler film. Same thing with Vito. I didn't know that we would be here. I just had faith that it needed to be done, and I feel like once the train leaves the station, you're just on your way. And it might take 10 years. This one took 5 years, but eventually you'll get to where you need to be.
We actually, if I just wait for the microphone. Oh.
The Al Maisel. Oh, I love that. Great. I got to meet him the other night, Albert Maisels. Great.
And just wait for the microphone. Sorry, just because we need the microphone because they are recording it, so we want to make sure everybody hears it.
First, I want to thank the festival for having these forums, which are open and free and archived. It's just great that the old lady has gotten young, thanks to Eugene.
Yes.
And I want to ask a question. Since most of the people haven't seen your film yet, and they should go see it, it's great.
Thank you.
I'm biased, but it's great.
You're in it, yes.
And the question I want to ask to both of you, because Basil, you spent many years in sort of the thankless job, and low-paying, if paying, job of programming a major lesbian and gay, bisexual, transgendered film festival. In the movie, there's the scene where they talk about the firehouse and putting up the sheet, and the difference between seeing a film where you are the majority rather than the minority, and that's gay sensibility question. So I'd like, and it seems that still non-gay people still won't go to the gay and lesbian film festivals, although there's really spectacular films there.
Yes.
That's part one. Part two is there are so many bad gay documentaries, dishonest, and no one says anything. The critics, if they review them, it's all sort of stroke, meaning they don't take them seriously like a good document. I'll just mention two. The Michael Judd. Michael Judd was a sexually active, closeted gay priest who became the hero of 9/11. But the filmmakers, the two films now, have not really told you the truth about who he actually was. And the other one is Sex Positive, a documentary made in 6 or 8 weeks with a sexy title about the person who claims to have invented safe sex. Again, dishonest, confabulation, yet no one would take it seriously enough to ask the questions about documentary filmmakers. So the question that I'm not asking you to comment on what I just said, but how do you, particularly with someone like Vito, with lots of people saying lots of different things, find out what is really authentically the truth of the person rather than the myth or the confabulation of how important the person who's talking to you about his or her friendship with Vito is. These are critical questions to any documentary filmmaker, but because we have so few historical documents of gay and lesbian, et cetera, history, it's really incumbent that the filmmakers really do the work of documentarians. So gay spirit, gay sensibility, and how do you get to the truth?
I would turn it to you just because it's more important that we hear from the filmmaker here. But I'm happy to talk about stuff as well.
It's hard to say. I mean, I think through editing, it's just trying to find out what the truth is and who is really to say what the truth is. It's really hard to say. It's very intuitive for me. I didn't want to whitewash that period. It was very important to me to present Vito with all his complexities, especially his sexuality. I think a lot of films about that period maybe put the sexual thing to the side, and I thought I didn't want to be dishonest about it. I mean, Vito was, as someone says in the film, he was a slut, and he was proud of that. And I really wanted to. He was sex positive, absolutely, and that was very important to him, and it was very important to gay liberation that they didn't separate sexuality from gay liberation. It was part of it, and it actually was a bonding thing for a lot of men. So, the baths, going to the baths. I wanted to treat it honestly and also humorously, and have his straight cousin, comment about how scandalous it was in the family, because he would openly talk about going to the baths, with his family and his mother at the dinner table, So I don't know if that answers your question, but I just wanted to present it honestly and and realistically.
And I mean, I would add to that, obviously not about the Vito specifically in your work process, because that's you, but in terms of approaching documentary and sort of gay subject matter and it not being necessarily looked at as critical. I mean, there's one thing that certain trade publications have done for years that drives me crazy, which is they'd review a film and they'd say, this is fine for gay fests, as if it's sort of like, you know, that's all it's going to do, it doesn't matter. Honestly, you know, there are a lot of bad gay docs out there, but there are a lot of bad docs out there in general. Often documentaries are led by the subject and not by the craft, meaning that it's an important topic and we want to get the topic out there in some way, but there's not as much time spent trying to make the film actually a good film. It's just creating a dialogue, creating some sort of advocacy for it. And I think, you know, gays are as probably guilty of that as any others. Sometimes, though, the advocacy is a lot more obvious. It's like, we want to make a film about transgender rights. We're going to show a story about transgender rights, but it doesn't really have a craft or sort of element to it. And I think that is a problem. And people should really look at it first and think, does this actually sustain a feature documentary treatment, or is it just, let me make like a PSA about it?
It's not good enough just to have your heart in the right place.
Exactly. I mean, it's too bad. I mean, and there are really important issues out there, but they're all not worthy of 90 minutes of somebody's time necessarily, unfortunately. The other question, which I think is a really valid question, is the role of sort of gay audiences and the ability to watch a film as a group, a sort of social experience. And you know, many gay film festival programmers will tell you, yeah, in an ideal world, we wouldn't need gay film festivals anymore because it wouldn't be gay film, it would be all film, and everybody would watch everything, and we'd be happy and dance around and whatever. But the truth of the matter is, people want to see themselves reflected on screen, and they like to have that sense of community and camaraderie and everything else that goes along with it. And so, you know, I think there's room for that sort of experience. I do wish that there was less of a ghettoization of gay film, and that there was more of an effort to bring your straight friends to the gay films, or bring your family or whatever, and that unfortunately doesn't happen as much. And we're getting a signal that we might be done, or do we have time for one done? One more. Maybe one more if there's any other. Hope that answered Jim's question anyway, sir. Any last comments? Oh, I don't run the gay festival anymore, and it's actually now, I think, in July, so it's probably going to be after the HBO screening. So you're going to have to ask them on that, but who knows? I think it's worth it. Certainly, it needs to get out to more audiences. Well, I want to thank Jeffrey for being here. I want to thank him for having the film in the festival. Definitely make sure to try to check it out, whether it be at one of the Oscar qualifying, or say again the screening that's here in New York.
It's here at the Coliseum in Washington Heights through Thursday, and then in West Hills in LA. But we're also going to be, on this Sunday, we're in Washington, D.C. We're going to be closing night in Seattle, Gay and Lesbian Film Festival. We'll be in Chicago on November 7th, which is the day Vito passed away 21 years ago. So that's going to be a very emotional night. And
is there a specific website for the film?
VitoRussoMovie.com, and a Facebook page we have set up, which is all the news about the film is in both of those places.
Fantastic. Thank you once again. Thank you for being here. We appreciate you coming to the forum.
Thank you.
And just a special follow-up thank you to Basil for moderating the conversation
today.
And
I forgot to say thank you to Eugene, to the Film Society, and this is all part of IndieWIRE's sort of relationship as well. So IndieWIRE.com, you should take a look at that. It's a daily website about independent film festivals, filmmakers, et cetera, et cetera.
The conversation will be archived on livestream.com/filmlink. Special thanks to Jeffrey. Congratulations on your film. We'll be back at 7 o'clock with Bill Plimpton. Thanks a lot.
Great. Thank you.